great it would be to get to 100 and still be running around on your own 2 legs or on your own 2 wheels. Just think how great it would be to get to 100 and still feel like living another 100.
Thank you, Tom. Well, we're going to have another of our case studies now. So we have Atilla Cansun from Merck Consumer Health here, and he's going to talk to us about a rather innovative program that Merck is piloting, I think, at the moment. Exactly. What's it called?
It's We100 is the name of the movement. So it's dedicated, thank you. It's dedicated to the dream of the company to help contribute to the society where humans are living 100 years. And specifically what we talk about, what we bid for, the dream of is, the terminology was used, coherent society, is the dream of a society where the young and the old depend on each other. Maybe they don't live with each other, but they interact, learn from each other, and build on their fortes. So specifically what we're going to do as of January in the UK is to start out a volunteering program with our employees at Merck Consumer Health that play the young part and match them up with the elderly to start something new and experience something new. So the motto of the program is going to be, there's always time for a first time. And we encourage the elderly who may not have experienced over a longer period of time, I'll show some data from a recent study, to encourage them to experience something new, to trigger a positive energy, to make them part of life, to give them this thrill that they may be missing, and to show them also that making the first step is going to be the spark into creating this movement. What I thought would be a great start also into the discussion is to share, maybe if, Holly, we can have a look at the chart, some of the, excellent. Yeah. So some of the recent learning. So over the past year or so, we have been studying in different countries from Malaysia to Chile, from the UK to Kenya, this area of what are expectations of people, of a society, of themselves, where the reality is they may be looking forward to a life of 100, if not more years, right? And the most recent one was about the elderly and their attitude of the elderly in Germany and in the UK specifically. We asked about 1,000 people, 60 to 89, to find out a little bit more about the qualitatives of what may hold them back, what is their attitude towards working. So similar to what you may have heard is 2/3, about I think 64% of the elderly, they're actually willing and wanting to go back to work after the retirement. So if you think about the dynamics that are going on in the vast majority of European businesses, that people start as of 60, counting their days, years and weeks and days towards retirement. And if it's kind of a normality for people to, even if it's the most capable employee, to kiss them goodbye and push them out into their next stage that everybody's comfortable with. However, 2/3 of them have in the back of their mind, if there was a possibility, they would like to go back to the workforce. The other thing that was very interesting is about 83% actually are willing and wanting to learn things from the younger generation.
Don't you wonder about the 17%?
I know.
I mean, obviously you can. Like, I can learn from older people. I always wonder about these people who don't give the answer.
There's always the other part, right? So we focus on the 83% who are willing to open up and learn, maybe not as young as the child here, but why not, right? It's about the attitude. So this also eliminates these prejudices of, I think, Baroness Altmann was referring to, people are a little bit stamped as they're rigid, they're not willing to learn, they may be omitting some of the trainings, also because I'm about to go to my retirement, right, what to expect. So does HR, and the corporation says, you know, they have a couple of years to go, why should we invest into this employee? Though vast majority are actually willing to learn. Then we also tapped into this territory of doing something, giving yourself a stimulus, an impulse, doing something new. This is very sad actually, I'm kind of embarrassed to share this, but more than half of people in the UK are complaining that they have not experienced anything new over a year or so, which is ridiculous, right? It is the routine that we're going through, and that becomes normality for the elderly, that they have this life, they are, you know, pre-tailored for them, they're in pension, and hence there are not really the expectations to step out of that routine and experience something new. And this is going to be the core of the idea, which I'm hoping will get big resonance in the UK, of there's always time for a first time.
Okay.
And why not doing a crash course, digital crash course? Why not learning how to date online, right? A lot of them may have lost their partner or have separated. They don't give themselves the benefit of the doubt and see what may come out. The other piece that's very interesting I wanted to share, again, from a qualitative perspective, what are in between the lines here happening is that about 2/3, again, of the elderly, they feel like they're being held back from actively participating in life. And a couple of the aspects of this is the younger generation and their attitude towards them. We just talked about it actually outside, that they're not doing themselves a favor by not discriminating in so many different ways, but when it comes to the elderly, it is okay to pull jokes, and it is kind of fine to put them to the side and celebrate the youth of the rest of us, right? And so they feel it. And 2/3 of them, they feedback that they don't feel comfortable in their corporate environment, in the fact that the HR is kind of skipping their name if it comes down to the training, who are the few people who are going to be sent over to be trained in this new great technology and whatnot. And so this is the piece that is not about capability, it's the piece about emotions. It's the piece that requires the society, and then in the context of the economies, the corporations, the politics, to help people break these barriers. So those are kind of the 4 or 5 of the data that we have just found out about. And even more so as a company, Merck Consumer Health, and all of our employees, I can talk for 4,500 people, we are wholeheartedly behind this movement of We 100, believing that everybody has the right and should get the support to live 100 great years. And if you ask me how to do that, is the core of it is going to be the coherent society, the generations where the young stands in for the old shares their experience and expertise with the young, and build on their strengths, build on each other.
So when I listen to you, I mean, it sounds great, and it's a very worthwhile initiative, but I hear you saying, you know, we the young will help the old. Like the old are out there and the young are inside Merck or inside any company or whatever. But of course you've got some old people working for you too. Yes. At least, you know, middle-aged or late middle-aged or whatever. Yes. And I mean, it's young people outside the company and older people within it as well. I mean, I presume I'm just being simplistic, but it reminds me a little bit of the awful programs that we as children were allowed to do when we were teenagers. And I don't know if you have the same awful expression for it, when you were sent off to visit people and it was called granny bashing.
Oh, no.
Everyone here remembers granny bashing, you know, where you were, you know, you go and visit an old person.
Horrible.
And it's so, I mean, you didn't do anything terrible to them, not really, but it was so patronising in a way. Yeah. And so how do you get past that notion that, you know, oh, we're being so good to people, oh, we're trying to help them? I mean, you said it. You said about how we can learn from them too, they can learn from us. It's both ways. But how as a company are you going to approach that?
So, great question. So we're looking at the whole spectrum of 100 years. So the program We 100 has 2 aspects to it. One is the younger. So we'll look at the kids in primary schools. We call it the Healthy Hour. We're about to also introduce this in Africa and South Africa, starting out with a couple of schools, teaching kids, the old coming in.
Right. So they're giving their
pharmacists, doctors, they're becoming teachers in the program, educating the young that life is not about the sprint that they're thinking they're being told for the next 30, 40 years, you know, finishing high school, going to university, nailing the fattest job, and, you know, it's a sprint as it is, right? But that it is a marathon. And if you want it to actually function properly when you hit 100, we say, you know, iconically, you want to blow the candles of your own 100th birthday cake, and you want to be dancing to your favorite music on your own legs and bite into your cake with your own teeth, right? How do you? And you can't intervene on that when you're actually realizing, oh God, my back is hurting, and you know, my knees, and they won't. Right? So I don't have the teeth anymore. It's just way too late. So we're looking at the 2 ends of the spectrum. The younger that ought to be thought that the real life ahead of them is not the one that goes up until you get the job and then, you know, you push your career with trainings. It's about 110. I mean, at the moment in Germany, the newborns, they're projected by life insurances. This is not my own, you know, positive thinking. 108, 109 years, right? So they better learn, next to math and physics and geography and everything, how to take care of themselves. This entails nerve care, very important, joints, muscle, nutrition, right? So that's the one piece of it where the the old come in for the help
so that
of the young.
They can do some kiddie bashing or whatever. I don't know.
Whatever you call it.
There isn't a word for that. No.
And so at the other end would be then the piece that you refer to where, I'm not saying it's the young, but it's employees of a company, right?
Yeah.
We talked about the policy and policy. The reality of it is unless you create cases with corporations, real-time business cases where it starts to work, you can't actually start a movement, a positive spiral. So we start out with 100 people in our UK organization to go out and match with the elderly. With that I mean the 60 to 89, that is the target group, to give them the chance to pick at their own will an experience that is going to give them the thrill, that's going to allow them to step out of their routine. And let's see what happens. So it's meant to be for the entire year. So we have a plan also to seed in people out of the goodness of their heart. We don't have the huge budgets to move now all of the UK, right? But to create these examples concretely that you can maybe watch on the TV, hear on the radio, and read in the magazine and get inspired and be part of it. And
I mean, something that I've heard from people is that, some people are very happy when they're retired, but some people retire and then they feel useless. This is the word they use. They say, I want to be useful. Yeah. It's not that I want someone to visit me, or it's not that I want, someone to provide me with something I don't have. It's that I want to still have a purpose.
Yes, absolutely.
So is that something that you've heard back, and is that something the program is looking at, giving people a purpose?
Absolutely. So the reality is over the past 50 years or so, the part of your life where you're retired has increased immensely, right? So if we're looking now, assuming 100 years old, and in some parts of the world, it is a reality already, right?
For some people,
it is a reality. So you're looking at 35, 37 years of doing what, right? Yeah. And so this reason for being something useful, as you said, to give back to the society. I have so much, I may have gone through a fantastic career and then they kissed me goodbye into my retirement. I have so much still to stimulate, to give back. And it may be that some of the wisdom is coming actually with the latest and greatest stuff, like listen to your mom.
I mean, I sort of wonder whether some of these people that Merck employees are visiting, actually what it'll turn into is the older person doing a bit of careers counselling. And like you say, well, maybe they need to learn online dating. Well, I mean, maybe your Merck employees need a bit of marriage guidance. It may work that way around
too. So we're planning to, of course, we're not forcing people, but we're looking also for volunteer sharing. So we're looking at a platform that we can actually broadly share these experiences for those, obviously, who want to share their intimate moment.
You're going to be monitoring it over the year, but I wonder, and email me when you get the results back in a year's time. I'd be interested to hear if actually a lot more of it goes the other way around than you thought it was.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does anyone in the audience have a question? Yes, there's a hand here. I don't think it is. No, it's not on.
We don't. You shout, yes.
They're going to just turn it on for you, I think.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah.
My name is Jan, I'm from Three Hands. So it strikes me that certainly the potential for an intergenerational learning element is there, but I also wonder if you've thought about this in terms of not just the social impact of this brilliant program, but also the fact that the older people are quite potentially your customers as well. And it strikes me that we have the chief marketing officer talking and not the chief corporate responsibility person talking. So what's the market opportunity here?
There, you should become a journalist. That's the question I should have asked.
No, great question. So we have separated the We100 project out from everything else that we're doing. Of course, we do have we are active in different parts of healthcare, but we're thinking about this solely as a standalone project, a concept to cross-fertilize across generations and see what happens out of it. So the way kind of it touches what we're doing as a business also is, of course, we're interacting with a lot of pharmacists, right? They're full of wisdom. They have a lot of passion for teaching kids. We talk to a lot of doctors who also want the chance to step out of their routine. So I was, earlier this year, I was in Mexico. There was a room full of Costa Ricans. They were saying, we want to sign up our whole clinic to go out to schools and share these very practical things that can be life-saving in the worst case, in the best case, prolonging their lives. So that is kind of the link in my job. I'm listening to consumers, patients, but also a lot to pharmacists and doctors. So we're trying to bring them together in a meaningful way.
Thank you. Any more questions? No, don't think right now. Are you going to be one of the volunteers?
Yes, I'm definitely looking into. Yes,
Yeah.
we have thought about up to 3 weeks of volunteering, which means that the company is allowing the employees to step out and sign up for this project. And they'll have to, just like any other project that they'd be working on, they would have to then report back.
Yes.
And we have also the kind of setup to share those magical moments when it happens, right? So that it's not a write-up or an email, but it is in this moment as it is happening, maybe blogging, sharing that moment and what they have realized, which I'm hoping is going to move millions of people. And me, myself, I'm wholeheartedly dedicated to this project. The origin of it is actually
that was my next question. You've ruined it. I was going to say, where did the idea for this project come from?
I mean, the idea is kind of in the DNAs of the company. So it started out as a pharmacist company 350 years ago. So they were mixing potions for the neighborhood, listening to them and everything. So there's a historical part to it. But me personally, how the spark came to me is my own dad. He was so interested in early retirement. And after he retired, himself,
yes.
Exactly. He had, 2 careers at the same time, very pulled into all sorts of direction. And then 5 years into his retirement, he has realized that, he has asked himself the question, how can I still contribute? Am I useful any longer? And you could tell that in his, tone of voice, in his attitude, in the interactions that he let loose of the best part, juicy part of life. So we have talked about it, and he himself then applied for jobs. He used to be an architecture professor, this happening in Istanbul, and is now leading the architecture faculty for one of the universities in Istanbul. He's 72 years old, and he loves it. It meant for him, after 10 years in architecture, of course, the software has evolved, the ways you teach stuff, and the content is no more what it was when he was good at his job, right? But it needed the 83% of him to get reactivated, show the openness and the willingness to learn from the young, from his assistants, from the PhD students, to get into the software and be able to function with the millennial generation. And that was a very inspiring personal story for me that I brought in as we were having these conversations in our executive committee, and wholeheartedly encouraged also other top managers to share their experience, and everybody, because the topic is not about selling products, it's about life, it's a heart matter. It's yourself, you ask yourself, you can at your kids, how can I enable them to live fantastic 100 years? Think about your parents, how much do they have to go? Could I increase their life quality? So everybody is naturally attracted and dedicated to this project, to this cause.
It's funny the stories that we tell publicly and the stories that we don't. I mean, one of the things I notice is that there's sort of a real genre of women and women journalists in particular talking about having kids. Like if you want to read articles about, whether the person had a cesarean or whether they, tried for natural childbirth or something, you will find thousands. And you'll often find them complaining about other women's choices, actually, which is a shame. But then when it comes to be that your own parents start to experience ill health, or that you're struggling trying to look after your own children at the same time as your parents need you, that's like it's a private drama. And of course it happens to all of us unless we die sadly young. So it's funny that isn't out there as just something that's part of life, and that there are models and stories and so on. So I'll be very interested to hear what sort of stories come back to you after the year, because I don't think it'll only be about the people you're working with. I think it'll be about their families, their work, their past,
Yeah, absolutely. So today, absolutely, that's what I'm looking forward to. There's going to be a lot of meat to the bones also when this becomes real. But already,
you might try and write a book or something. You might try and pick 10 of the stories or something and do 10 or 15 chapters.
We'll absolutely look into the most impactful way of sharing this with everybody. What we have already done internally, as we were having discussions in different platforms in Merck itself, in consumer health, we looked into also sharing these kind of personal perspectives. So our intranet site, for which we just plugged also with you, thank you very much for coming into my world. People have shared from their perspective, what does We100 mean? And these are, from everywhere, from Mexico, Hungary, from Africa, a lot of them sharing either as a professional their difficulties as it links to the different generations, the younger, as you said, becoming a mother for the female employees, and how do I deal with my parents as they grow older, they're going through their own situation, right? Menopause being one that was mentioned earlier, this was also part of it. So I'm looking forward to 10,000s of stories like this, touching stories like this,
I think you might
and
want to
role
choose,
models.
Yeah, you might want to choose, I mean, the role model element is very important. You want to choose sort of a few, not necessarily the most striking or odd ones, but kind of totemic ones, ones that, you know, again and again, the same issues come up, these questions of, you know, how do you navigate, you know, falling in love for a second time when you're older or whatever, you know, those sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some years ago, I wrote a piece for our Christmas issue in The Economist, which was about statisticians during the Second World War. And I used to work for the Royal Statistical Society, and I mean, you know, unless you read this article, you won't necessarily know this, but I mean, statistics, modern statistics, is very much based on developments during the Second World War.
Sure.
There were a bunch of young men who were, and they were all men, who were stopped going off to university and they were sent to the war effort as statisticians. And they became all the famous statisticians, and of course they were all in their late 80s and early 90s, and I was writing it. And so it was really interesting to talk to them about, you know, how they had made a difference to the course of the World War, and then they had gone off all around the world and created this entire new discipline. And it just strikes me, you're going to have people telling you, you know, similar stories of things you had no idea about.
I think so.
You should
too.
capture them.
Yeah,
You should definitely capture them.
Definitely. And pick together with you if you're interested. I'll
Well,
share
do
some
share
of
with
them.
me in a year what you hear about it. I think we're out of
Excellent.
time. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
It's a really
inviting me.
interesting
Thank you.
project.
Thank you.